Hi guys, it's Amanda again from Canadians for Vaccine Choice. We are here today with Vice President of Vaccine Choice Canada, Ted Kuntz. Ted, welcome, and we're so glad you could join us today.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to my conversation with you.
Oh, as are we, as are we. So we're just going to get right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of kick us off on your journey with vaccine injury.
Well, I think my story is probably typical of most that you'll encounter, is that I vaccinated my son Joshua with no thought about it. I did no research. I wasn't even conscious that I needed to make an informed choice. And so the unfortunate part with my son is Josh was injured by his very first vaccine shot, which was the DPT shot. This was back in 1984.
Okay.
And Josh reacted to the shot with developing an uncontrolled seizure disorder, which he had for his entire life.
Oh.
And as a result of the injury, and it was apparent to me that, one of the expressions that I would use when people would ask me is I would say the son that I brought home from the doctor's office that day was not the same son I took to the doctor's office. I had a different child.
Yeah.
Josh was, in his first 4 months of life, he was a very content baby, healthy, happy, breastfed, slept well, ate well. We were just thrilled at this beautiful baby that we had. That all changed after the vaccine shot. He became agitated, didn't sleep well, was cranky, irritable, and then 21 days after the shot, he had his first grand mal seizure. But we had taken him to the family doctor twice in that interval to say there's something wrong. He's no longer content. He's not happy. It could possibly something have happened from the shot. Could have been a bad shot. And the doctor was completely dismissive of the idea that it could be vaccine injury. Vaccines are safe. Vaccines are effective. Couldn't be the vaccine, just a coincidence. All of those speaking lines that doctors are so good at, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Completely dismissed our concern that it was vaccine injury.
Right. And did they happen to treat him afterwards? Like, did they diagnose him with anything other than what you already felt in your gut?
Well, they put him through a whole series of tests. So, MRI scans, EEGs, complete blood work, and everything came up normal. And so we had this child that all of the testing turned up negative. There was nothing to explain the change in his health or his behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I would ask about the vaccine. I would say, I think it's important to, indicate that there's an adverse reaction to this particular vaccine. The lot number, is there a way we can look up to see if there's a problem with that particular lot? Completely refused. So they never investigated to any extent that I'm aware of the connection between his change in medical condition and vaccinations. So as far as I know, Josh would not be listed under the reporting of an adverse event from a vaccine shot.
Right. So then after the doctors turned Josh away, how did you manage treatment for him, or what did you do to get him the help he needed?
Well, at that point, I was the only kind of medicine that I was familiar with was what you got from your family physician and from your local hospital. So we persisted with their course of treatment, which was a series of anti-seizure medications, and we tried everything that allopathic medicine had to offer, including some investigational drugs that were not yet available for public use. What happened with Josh is that he was seizing once a month, and each seizure was about 15 to 20 minutes long. When Josh was about 4 years of age, for some unexplained reason. And I now suspect it was because I had given Josh a second vaccine shot. He had stepped on a rusty nail. I took him to emergency and asked for a tetanus shot. And I was very clear with him. I just want a tetanus. I have a strong belief that he reacted to the pertussis. I do not want a DPT shot. I just want tetanus. Yes, Mr. Kuntz. Yes, Mr. Kuntz. And then after the shot, I was told that it was a DT shot, that diphtheria and tetanus was in it. And I was very angry with the hospital. I said, I was very clear with you what my request was. You confirmed that that's what you're doing, and then you didn't. You basically committed fraud.
Yeah.
But they don't take a parent's concern seriously. And I'd like to go back and look at his medical records and just see the timing of all of that. But Josh then began to seize at a ferocious rate. He was then seizing at a rate of 12 to 15 times a day.
Wow.
And each seizure, as I said, was 15 to 20 minutes long. So he was seizing nonstop almost all the time. Seizure, post-seizure, sleep, seizure, post-seizure, sleep. When Josh was 5, the doctors at Children's Hospital asked us not to come back. The chief neurologist pulled me aside one day and he said, Ted, and we knew each other well because we had been in hospital for prolonged periods of time.
Right.
So every neurologist knew us, every nurse on the neurological ward knew us. And he just said, Ted, don't bring your son back anymore. He said, we don't know what to do with your son. We've got nothing to offer. We've tried everything we've got. All you're doing is frustrating us and frustrating yourself. And I actually appreciated his honesty with me because that was the truth. The truth was they had nothing to offer.
They didn't know. Yeah.
They didn't know. Because they were unwilling to consider vaccine injury, they weren't going to look at anything like detoxification.
Right.
And so what that did is it forced me to begin to broaden my scope of inquiry about how else could I treat my son. And it was then that I began to explore a naturopath, a homeopath, acupuncture, herbal remedies, chelation. And we found a naturopath who worked with us intensively for 3 years. And during that 3-year period, the seizures reduced from 12 to 15 times a day. They would then become, 5 times a day, 3 times a day, once every 2 days, once every week. And we finally got to a place where we plateaued at 3 to 4 times a month. And each seizure went from 15 minutes long to 10 minutes, 7 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds. And so from about age 5.5 on, he was seizing 3 to 4 times a month, and each seizure was 30 seconds to a minute long. So a huge improvement.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the bottom line was that Josh was severely neurologically injured. He was functioning at the capacity of a 2-year-old. Because of the unpredictability of his seizures, he could never be left unattended. And so Josh required 24-hour care for his entire life. And so, typically what would happen is that I would sleep with Josh because I found I couldn't go to sleep at night. I couldn't fall asleep with Josh in the other room because I was always so hyper alert listening for him. I found the only way I could fall asleep is if I was actually in the same bed with him, and his seizing would wake me up.
Wow.
And we made the same decision when he was in hospital, is that we made a decision never to leave him alone. And so in the daytime, his mom would be with him, and at nighttime, I would be with him. And we were with him 24 hours a day.
Wow. Wow. That's got to be so hard.
Exhausting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the capacity to function as a normal family, as a normal couple, just didn't happen. At one point, we were granted respite care from the provincial government, and we found it was very difficult to accept that respite care. When he was doing well, we didn't want somebody else to have him. We wanted to enjoy him while he was doing well. And when he was seizing, it was too hard to give him away to somebody else to care for him. And so we found that even when we utilized respite care, we never stopped thinking or worrying about him. And it was just sometimes it was just easier to have them than not have them.
Yeah, no, I get it completely. I get it. So did he still see anyone at the children's hospital at all, or he just never went back?
Well, that's a great question. We would go back once a year for an evaluation. And it was very interesting because, as I said, Josh's condition improved. And, they would say, wow, Josh is really doing well. And they were delighted. And I would say, would you like to know what we're doing? And they would say, what? And I would start to talk about, the homeopathic remedies that we're using, some of the chelation, some of the acupuncture. And they would just go, not interested. If you want to waste your time with that, that's up to you. But I'm not interested in having that conversation. And I would say, but you've acknowledged that he's getting better. And the response was, well, he probably would have gotten better anyways.
Oh,
What I came to understand is what I consider, the two sins of the medical profession: arrogance and ignorance.
correct.
They have this arrogance that they already know, and when you bring information to them that's different than what they know, they resist it or deny it. And so there's this profound ignorance as well. And so I now consider the medical profession a dangerous profession that we have to treat with extreme caution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, can you imagine what would happen if they just combined the two of simplistic, holistic, and allopathic? What they could achieve together?
The only doctor that expressed interest was a resident. So she was young, and hadn't been fully indoctrinated yet in her profession. And she was very curious, and she wanted to know exactly what remedies we gave and how long and this and that. And she was the only person that showed any genuine interest in what we were doing. And so I was very disheartened by the professionals at Children's Hospital. I thought their commitment to health is so compromised by their ideology that they
Blind.
refuse they, they refuse to see an improvement in health because it doesn't fit with their paradigm.
Correct.
And so it told me they're not committed to health; they're committed to supporting their ideology.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, not a lot of people will talk about this aspect, but we know it takes a massive toll on relationships, and it's a financial burden, and people don't see that behind the scenes. They see the injured child, but they don't see how it affects the family. Can you kind of give an insight on maybe how that affected your family?
It's devastating. So, as I said a few minutes ago, you can't have a normal family experience. We would often go, like on a weekend, you'd hop in the car and you go to someplace like the park or whatever it is. But as soon as he started to seizure, you had to turn around, go back home, or call an ambulance. And so normal family activities were always tentative. They're always, you're guessing, is he good today to go? Should we try to go? Should we not go? And then, as I said, you don't have any time as a couple. So the couple relationship comes apart. We worked extremely well together in terms of our care for our son, but our ability to be a husband and wife didn't happen. And that resulted in the ending of the relationship. And in some ways, that was a blessing, because the advantage of the relationship coming apart is that Josh would either be with his mom or he would be with me. We were on a week-on, week-off schedule.
Okay.
And when he was with his mom, I knew that he was well cared for, and I could relax and enjoy myself for 7 days.
Right.
And then when I had him, he was my sole focus, because I knew that I only had him for 7 days and then he'd be gone again. And so I gave him all of my attention. And so I think the good news is Josh got an incredibly high level of care. And as two individuals, we got some respite from the responsibility of the care, so that life became a little easier. And so unfortunately, the marriage had to come apart for us to be able to enjoy life again.
Right. Right. Um, and as for the financial burden, how much would you say over the span of the 32 years would that
It,
have
you know,
come out
it,
of your pocket?
it's hard to calculate that. My wife was forced to quit her job and become a full-time care attendant. So we were reduced to one income. We were very fortunate in that both Kathy and I were good advocates for Josh, and we were able to secure a significant level of funding for him for care. So we had one-on-one support in the school system. We had after-school support. But his level of support, and then when he became an adult, he required all the care while we were at work. His funding was $170,000 a year. So you add that up, and that probably started when he was 18, and he passed away at 32. So, that's 14 years at $170,000 a year. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
And then that's just for the support we got, the speech therapy, the physiotherapy. Of course, that didn't include how it affected our own personal income. That didn't factor in the cost of hospital care or medications or any of those things. So, I would say millions. This injury cost millions of dollars for sure.
Yeah, out of pocket. Man. Well, along with that, I mean, I know there's a lot of roller coaster of emotions when you realize what's happened and nobody's listening. And can you kind of take us through the emotion from when you kind of figured it out to when you woke up, I guess, to now, and how you've made peace with your son's injury in your life?
It was a long process. I mean, the indoctrination that vaccines are safe and effective is so strong that it was hard to let go of that. And so I was, at the time, I was completing my master's degree in psychology at the university. And so I had access to the medical library, and I would go and pull out the medical journals and photocopy them. And I was reading the research on, I needed to understand what the medical literature had to say about the DPT shot. And the more that I read, the more concerned I got. And I had boxes and boxes of photocopied research articles that I had read. I had a library full of books. I mean, I had spent literally 30 years investigating this. And the more that I learned, the more questions I had, and the more doubt I had that proper science was being done, proper safety testing. But the lie was too big. Like I couldn't believe, as most people can, that this medical product could be pushed on us by an industry with so little attention to safety and safeguards. And it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago that I reached out to Etta West from Vaxxed Canada, and I said, Etta, like, I don't know whether I've fallen so far down the rabbit hole or I'm just so confused, but I can't find any reason to think that anybody should be vaccinating their child. Like, I've gone completely to a place of saying this is a dangerous medical practice. Yeah. And it's flawed and I think even criminal. And I just said, have I gone too far down the rabbit hole? And she said, no, you finally woke up.
Wow.
And it was, in hindsight, it was surprising to me that I held on to my trust in the medical profession as long as I did, my trust that somehow the science must be being done. I just hadn't got to it yet. I kept doubting what I was discovering and thinking I just hadn't looked far enough. But what I've really come to realize is, this is the Wizard of Oz. You pull back the curtain and there's nothing there. The emperor really has no clothes. And I would say the loss of that, the loss of my trust in the medical system, the loss of my trust in good government governance and regulatory practices, the loss of people's ability to think for themselves. I mean, incredibly disappointing. Yeah. And so you asked how I've made peace with that. I've had to do a lot of hard work, and I don't know how much you're aware that I wrote a book called Peace Begins With Me. And it was about my journey of making peace with my son's disabilities and this human condition. And I finally got to a place of saying, I can't spend the rest of my life being angry and resentful and disappointed. I mean, it's too hard.
Yeah.
I have to figure out how to make peace with this human condition. I have to meet it where it's at, and then see if I can't be a resource to humanity so that it wakes up. And so that's what I've done. Yeah, are there some days it just takes the wind out of my sails? Absolutely. But I'm committed that I can't allow, the disappointment is because I have an expectation
Right.
that humanity is more evolved than it is.
Right.
We're not a very evolved species.
Nope, but you are a fabulous resource in this fight, and I can tell you that without a hesitation in my, oh, it's just so powerful to watch you speak at these events and whatnot, and just I can only imagine what an incredible advocate you were for Josh. Like, just as much as it breaks my heart, it lifts me up, you know. So to move on, I guess, can you maybe explain Josh's final months for us?
Well, so Josh passed away in February of 2017, and he passed in his sleep. I was at a meeting the next day, and I was waiting for his mom to come to the meeting, and she was late, and I couldn't figure out why she was late. And then we got a phone call to say Josh had passed. Oh. And you know, it's kind of interesting. You know, I lived with the possibility that Josh would die every single day of his life. And yet when it happened, it still took me by surprise. But what I'm grateful for is that he passed easily, as far as I know. He passed in his sleep. He was with caregivers. And I feel bad for them that they were the ones that were holding the responsibility for his care when he made his transition. But I also, I've come to believe that we're also spiritual beings on a journey, and I believe Josh came to be of service to humanity. And I think his work was done, and I'm grateful that his transition was as peaceful as it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you maybe give us an idea of his character? I mean, I've seen a few things, and he's just a little light.
Well, he was a very strong-willed young man. Beautiful energy, though. But he was, and you know, I have to laugh is because, you know, his vocabulary was very compromised. He probably only had about 40 words, but he communicated very clearly. He was very strong. You know, but I just, you know, like, one of the stories that really affects me still is, you know, I would talk about Josh all the time, and I had clients that would say, I'd love to meet Josh. I'd love to meet Josh. And so with this one woman who really wanted to meet Josh, I said, okay, I'm going to be at this park at this time on the weekend. And if you want to come and walk with us while I walk him in his chair, come join us. So sure enough, she showed up at the park, and she was just like, it was like she was meeting a celebrity. You know, she was so excited, and he's kind of, you know, not interested in this at all. It's like, I could just see that he was not warming up to her, and she's trying to get him to smile at her and to just acknowledge her. And he's not having anything to do with it. And he's kind of looking at me, and then he's looking at her. And so I start to push him in his chair, and I see him go. So he's looking over at her, and it's almost like he goes, okay. He takes his hand, he reaches over, and he grabs her hand, and she just starts to weep.
Oh.
And it's just like he knew that, okay, this heart needs to be touched. That's my job right now. I can do that. And I just thought there's this conscious being in there somewhere that knew that that was what was being asked for.
Yeah, just trapped.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
One other little story. I mean, there were so many of them with Josh. but I can remember being in Children's Hospital and he was seizing. He had status seizing. He was seizing for 4 days in a row. And he was literally like a limp doll. And I had him on my shoulders and I was carrying him around and I was crying. And I just said, "Oh, Josh, where are you?" And his head pops up. He goes, "Here I am." And I was just like, "Oh my God, like, how did he do that?"
Oh,
He was a beautiful soul. Yeah. Yeah.
oh my gosh. Oh, yep. A special kid. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So, okay, hold, hold on. So to move on then, how do you feel now when you look around and you see injury everywhere and the push for mandates all over? How does that make you feel?
Oh, it breaks my heart because, once you recognize vaccine injury, you start to see it all over the place. You see it in allergies, you see it in seizure disorders, you see it in learning disabilities, autism. I mean, the amount of autism is staggering now.
Yeah.
It just breaks my heart to see it. You see it in people's misalignment of their facial features now, in their eyes, in their smile, and now I see it in Josh's pictures that I didn't see before,
Great.
and so the neurological injury is there, um, and then I see how difficult it is to engage parents in this conversation. They're so afraid to have the conversation.
Yeah. It's the fear.
And I have good friends that I have a lot of respect for. They're intelligent, competent people in their own domain. But when I introduce this conversation, they can't hear me. And you just see the eyes glaze over and you lose them.
Yeah.
And I just, I used to think, humanity is asleep. I actually wrote a book called How Can I Wake Up When I Don't Know I'm Asleep?
Wow.
Uh, And somebody said to me lately, humanity isn't asleep. They've been put into an induced coma.
Induced coma.
And I think that that's probably a more accurate description. People have become hypnotized in a way they don't recognize.
Yeah.
And it's tragic to watch. The mandates and the recklessness of our legislators in moving in that direction shocks me. I had spent 3 days in New Brunswick as they were hearing responses to their Bill 39 that was looking at mandating vaccines there. And I watched over a 3-day period how those legislators woke up. They went from being dismissive and
Cold.
seemed to be uncaring on day one. And by day 3, you could see there was anger, there was fire in their belly. They were beginning to recognize how deceived we all are around this medical practice.
Into a blow.
And it was incredible to watch their transformation. And I thought, okay, these 15 legislators got it. And they're going to go back and talk to their colleagues and end this insanity in New Brunswick. And that's not what happened. I don't know how those conversations went with their colleagues, but when the legislature opened this fall, day 2 of the legislature, they brought in a new bill to mandate vaccines and take away all non-medical exemptions. And then they had the gall to bring in the notwithstanding clause, which is, saying that the charter will not apply to this. I mean, to me, that's an absolute acknowledgement that we recognize we're violating your rights and freedoms, and we're going to.
And that's why the charter was created. So.
And so I can't even listen to the debate about that bill in New Brunswick. It wounds me to hear people stand up and argue to have our rights and freedoms taken away from us.
People were elected by us to listen to us and to move along and listen, and they're not
listening. Are there days that my heart is heavy? Absolutely. And then again, I realize I can't indulge in that. I have to stand up and claim whatever authority I have and do what I can to wake humanity up. That's my responsibility. To me, when we know something, we have a responsibility to tell others that don't know. And so I can't indulge in sadness or grief or frustration. I have to step up.
Right. What would you like people to learn in your son's name? Like, what would you say to the people that don't get it?
I'd like them to know that all of us care deeply about our children. They've been convinced that somehow people that question vaccines don't care about their kids. I mean, I find it staggering that they could even think that. But again, I think it's the same dilemma as arrogance and ignorance. They think they know something that they actually don't know. Right. My wish is that they simply did some very basic research. The title of my vaccine book is Dare to Question. Dare to question what you've been told. Ask for evidence. Because what I know is the evidence isn't there.
It's not.
No.
You have
the size of the fraud is staggering.
Yeah.
And it's what the Nazis knew in World War II, is that if you want to lie, if you tell a big enough lie, you can get away with it. And that's what's happening in this medical system right now. Yep. The lie is too grand for us to accept.
Yep. What would you say to these government workers trying to mandate the vaccines for all? Like, what do you want them to know? What would you say to them, the arrogance behind these bills?
I believe that every one of them comes from a place of being well-intended. Yes. And I accept that from what they've been told, they think they're doing the right thing. But I want them to do their homework. I want them to do the research. I want them to demand evidence for the claims that are being made. And I'd like them to understand how what's happening here is not a medical issue. This is a human rights issue, and that they are complicit in taking away our rights and freedoms. Yep. And I know that it doesn't get messaged that way in the media, but that's what's happening. I think that if they did a survey that said, are you willing to give away your rights and freedoms? Are you willing to give away your right to make medical decisions for your child? Are you willing to give away your right to decide what gets injected into your body? I think people would realize that, this is not a medical issue. But, the media is also complicit in this. They are knowingly complicit. Yes. Again, I spent years thinking that if they just had better information, they would do better journalism. And I exhausted myself writing letters to, all of the major newspapers, the CBC, the National Post, Global Television, Globe and Mail, and without no exceptions, they all buy the mantra. They refuse to participate in responsible journalism on this, quite consciously.
Yeah. Well, where does their funding come from? Yeah. So it's a little bit easy to see where the bias lies there.
And it's disheartening that they are so vicious and dismissive of families that have lost their children to vaccines. The callous disregard is disheartening to see. Absolutely. And so again, the loss here is huge. You lose the health of your child. You might lose your marriage. You might lose your career. And then you lose your trust in the medical profession. You lose your trust in mainstream media. You lose your trust in government. Like, this is a very challenging path to be on. And there's none of us that are on this path easily or willingly. We're here because we feel we have a responsibility to be here.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, knowing what you know now, where would you suggest someone just learning about this topic, or just waking up, or just affected by this, begin their research? what would be a good starting point? Do you have a favorite book you'd recommend, or a study that just went, well, bam, wow, this is where, this is it? You know, do
Well,
you have anything that stands out like that?
the challenge is you can't go down this rabbit hole too fast, because it it's it's difficult. And so how do you move into it? I just ordered a book that I received yesterday, that's called something about why more parents aren't vaccinating their children. It's a very little book. I read it in probably an hour and a half, and I thought, this is like grade one introduction to this conversation. um, and it's like, and the message is, hello. um, the message is begin to question what you've been told. I think my book, Dare to Question, is probably a grade 3 or 4 level entry into this conversation. I try to be gentle with parents. I try to honor that they're uh, wanting to do the right thing, thinking they're doing the right thing by vaccinating, and just begin to question what they've been told, and then providing them with some basic information that would suggest that we're not being told the truth. I would say my favorite book is Dr. Richard Moskowitz's book, Vaccines or Reappraisal. He's a pediatrician who's been practicing for 50 years. I think he writes incredibly thoughtfully. He's articulate. He's well researched. To me, you can't read his book and then think this product is safe and effective.
Right. Yep. Kind of a different question, but kind of similar in many ways. What do you think about the constant attacks on parents of the vaccine injured children from other adults? Like the poison and the bile that comes out of these grown adults towards people that have suffered loss and continue to suffer through their children's journeys. What do you think, or what would you say to them?
Well, I don't know how many of those attacks are real people.
Yeah, I have to agree.
Yeah. So, if I look at what I've personally experienced by people face to face, there are people that have said to me they don't agree with me, and there are people that say, I can't, I can't believe what you're telling me. It's just too hard. But I've never had people be vile with me, or as obnoxious as I read on social media, for example. And so when I read some of the incredibly hateful statements that are there, I have to believe that this is artificial intelligence, or this is paid trolls, that this is not my fellow human beings, because I personally find it difficult to believe that compassionate human beings can respond that way. So I choose to believe, and maybe I'm just being naive, that this is artificial intelligence that has been programmed by the vaccine industry to attack us.
Yeah, and we know that does occur. We've seen the Craigslist ads looking for trolls, so it does happen. Okay, so you were looking for safety studies at one point. Am I correct in assuming that? Okay, what did you find with any of those that you inquired about?
Well, when you start to dig in and do the research, and you start to realize either the small sample sizes, or the limitations of the research, or the fact that they exclude anybody that shows any ill health condition before they do the testing. And then when you recognize that none of them use a neutral placebo, that we're determining safety by comparing a vaccine to another vaccine, or to a placebo that actually has aluminum in it or other things in it, you start to realize, wait a sec, like that's not how science is done. That's not how good safety is done. And I started to look for vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies, and the only ones that I can find, which are done independently, show very clear evidence that unvaccinated kids are healthier than vaccinated kids.
Yep.
And then I've got, in my own family, I've got grandchildren. Some are who are completely unvaccinated, and some who are partially vaccinated. And I can see the difference in their health.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that from many families that, like mine, they have their first child is a vaccine injured child, and sometimes they have to have 2 or 3 vaccine injured children before they finally connect the dots.
Yeah.
And then eventually they have a child that's completely unvaccinated, and they have their own vaccinated versus unvaccinated study, and they're seeing the difference, and the difference is stark.
Right. It's incredible. Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with you there.
we need to do this kind of videos with moms and dads with unvaccinated children and have them tell stories about the health of their children. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got a few of them coming down the pipe from Canada. So that's encouraging. People are getting louder and braver, which is nice to see. It's wonderful because, like I said, 2 years ago, we wanted to start this and there weren't a lot of takers, but it's amazing what 2 years can do. Like you watch the progression unfold and then people are starting to stand up. They're starting to use their voice, and that's what needs to happen. No one else is going to get it if other people don't talk about it, you know?
no, I see that this movement is growing very quickly. And I suspect that the medical industry, the vaccine industry, has done their surveys, and they know that they're losing the credibility battle here.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why there's such a push for mandates, because that's the only way they'll be able to keep their numbers up, because they are losing credibility very quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's their panic mode,
Yeah.
right? So where do you see this story ending? Let's fast forward maybe 2 years. Do you see an outcome, or are you still hanging back and waiting to see? Like,
Well, I believe that this vaccine paradigm is going to collapse. It's a house of cards that's built on a fraudulent foundation. And so it's just a matter of time before it collapses. Um, you know, I keep hoping that that will happen sooner than later so that we can stop the vaccine injury. But because of the power of the media, people's blind trust in the medical profession, and because of the vaccine mandates, the what I suspect will be the path here is that there'll be more vaccine injury before we finally wake up.
yeah, unfortunately.
Um, I think our medical system can't handle the amount of injuries that are being caused, everything from allergies to life-threatening allergies to autism, learning disabilities, eczema. I mean, you name it, the seizure disorders. Our medical system is going to collapse under the weight of that amount of injury. Our education systems are going to collapse because of the amount of unteachable children that are in our school systems now. And our trust in the medical system is going to collapse overnight. Um, this is a house of cards, and I think the collapse will actually happen very quickly when it happens.
Yeah, you might be right. And you can start to see the telltale signs now, but it's just a matter of like people raising up.
Yeah, and so, to me, the mandates in some ways are doing us a favor because it's pushing people to finally wake up. There are lots of people that may still be pro-vaccine, but when they start to recognize that their rights and freedoms have been taken from them, that they no longer have sovereignty over their own body or that of their children, I think that's what is pushing enough of the people to realize that this is tyranny. This is medical tyranny. This is totalitarianism. Um,
And where does it end, right? We know how many new vaccines are coming down the pipeline. So where do the mandates end?
yeah.
They can put any other ones into that schedule they want, and you are forced once this goes through. So it's easier to stand up and fight now than let this bill get passed and try to correct it later on,
Exactly.
you know? So I know you're a psychotherapist. You hear the term cognitive dissonance regularly. Why do you think people get stuck in such hard cognitive dissonance on this topic?
Well, again, I think You know, when I stand back and look at what's going on, the vaccine industry has done a masterful job capturing people and turning off their brains so that people are not thinking critically. And I find it an interesting phenomenon. Like I said, you can have rich critical conversations about all kinds of things, you know, whether it's climate change or 5G or man landing on the moon or whatever it is. And you can have these lovely, intense conversations where ideas get put out on the table and wrestled with. But this is the one area that's a no-go zone. And so from a psychological perspective, the industry and its colleagues in the media have done a masterful job of turning people's brains off. And so we've got people who are literally not thinking for themselves. So they, you know, when you think you already know something, you don't leave space for something to challenge that. You know, it reminds me of you know, kind of a spiritualist story of, you know, a Buddhist monk is sitting down with a student, and you know, the monk asks the student, "Would you like a cup of tea?" And the student says yes, and so he starts pouring the tea into the cup, and he keeps pouring and pouring and pouring, and the tea's running all over the table. And the student says, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "I'm just trying to tell you there's no room left in your cup." And you know, I think the point for us is that we think we already know something. We think our cup is already full, so there's no room for us to put something in it.
Yeah. Yep.
And the willingness to question opens up some space to allow new information to come in. So I think that's part of the problem, is that there's no space because we've been convinced that we already know something. The other challenge is that the ability to share the information that you and I know has been compromised. I mean, our mainstream media, our social media, our algorithms on Google, like everything is being coerced so that we're no longer having access to information. And so if you only hear one song, you think that's the only song.
Yep. Yep. Agreed. Oh boy. Wow. Yep. How how do you cope with your significant loss? I mean, that's a heavy blow, and it breaks my heart just even having to think of anybody having to deal with it. And how do you cope with it every day?
Well, again, if I thought that I was a physical being and this was my only life, I think that loss would be devastating. I've chosen to believe that I'm a spiritual being. I'm here for a purpose. Josh came for a purpose. I honor his contribution to humanity. I'm grateful that I got to be his father. So I've made a decision to hold that perspective, because when I think that way, it inspires me. I have gratitude, and I feel like I'm living a very purposeful life.
Mhm.
The other story is too hard a story to carry around.
I get it.
Uh, and so I've made a conscious decision to tell myself a story that allows me to be of service to humanity going forward.
And you definitely are. You
Thank you.
definitely are. Um, One last question, and then I'll let you get on with your day. I don't know what you can say about this. What can you tell the fellow Canadians out there about the legal challenge? Can you give us a rundown on why this was brought about for people that have no idea what's going on? What started this, and why is this happening?
Well, we've been thinking about a legal challenge for a while. I mean, the fact is the Ontario government has been violating our rights and freedoms for 37 years by having vaccine mandates for school attendance.
Mhm.
What really pushed us is when 2 years ago was that they then introduced mandatory education sessions for those of us that needed to be re-educated, and then forced us to sign an affidavit that contained compelled speech that basically says that we are admitting that we are putting our children at risk by not vaccinating. And that's not how any parent who doesn't vaccinate feels. They feel like they are making the best decision for their children based upon the research that they've done. So we're being compelled to sign something that we don't agree with. And it was those two actions that finally said, we need to stand up and take action here. And so we began to think about how we would move forward with this. We began to look for a lawyer that would carry our case forward. And this is a challenging issue. And what we discovered is that most lawyers are unable or unwilling to be advocates for this kind of a legal challenge. One is because they don't support our position personally, and two is they know that in some ways it's a career-ending move to take this kind of a position.
Right.
When we found Rocco Galati, what we discovered was a fierce warrior who is courageous, who has taken the government of Canada on numerous times around constitutional violations, and has a high degree of success rate. And in addition to that, Rocco has his own vaccine injured child. So this is personal for him. Yes. He knows our journey and he's done his own research. And so we feel incredibly fortunate that we found a lawyer who is both competent, skilled, passionate, and deeply understands this issue. And it was time to move forward. We also felt like we could see the writing on the wall with New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, now PEI, British Columbia, and we wanted to send a signal to say, you continue down the path of violating our rights and freedoms, we will take you to court. And so that was a very strong message I delivered to the legislature in New Brunswick when I was there, saying, if you go forward, we will definitely take you to court. And they asked how far, and I said, to the Supreme Court of Canada. We will not stop until we end this violation. So I think that we are in an incredibly strong position. As Rocco said, is that we're going to have an evidence-based discussion in a court of law. And what I know is that the medical industry cannot withstand an evidence-based discussion in a court of law. We actually feel very hopeful. You know, the risk is that we'll have a biased judge or a corrupt judge. Right. But we're gonna carry this as far as we can. We're gonna take it to the Supreme Court of Canada.
Be there every single day, and I will be letting everybody in Canada know what is happening as it's going on. Everybody needs to know.
We're looking forward to asking the government questions under testimony that they have to answer. And we know when we say how many safety studies included a neutral placebo, they have to say 0, right?
Yep. It's going to be incredible. I'm
looking
forward to it. I really, really am. Well, I want to thank you. You said you wrote a bunch of books. Where can people find your books, Ted?
Well, probably the one that's of most of interest to people from this conversation is the book Dare to Question. And so I have my own website, daretoquestionvaccination.com. And on that website, you can download the book for free. I just want the information to get out there. And if you want a print copy, you can order it through Amazon. And again, there's a link on my website, or go to Amazon. The other books, Peace Begins With Me, is also on Amazon.
Okay, wonderful. Maybe we can get some of those to deliver to people at the Vaxxed 2 premiere. We're going to be running a fundraiser for Vaccine Choice Canada. This is what we're doing with the Vaxxed 2 premiere. So anybody that's coming out to see Vaxxed 2, you know, come on out, and it's a powerful movie. You'll love it. We're raising funds for Vaccine Choice Canada to get us through these legal challenges, because we know it's going to keep on falling down the line. So let's help them out, and let's get fighting, and let's all raise up and be brave.
Great. I'm glad to donate books to your showing of Vaxxed 2. Just let me know where to send those books, and whatever donations people make can go to this cause.
Oh, thank you, Ted. That's so great. That's so great. Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me today. It was incredible to hear your story face to face. I know a lot of Canadians have heard the general version, but I'm so excited to share this one with them. And hopefully we will see you out at one of the Vaxxed 2 premieres. For those of you that don't know, Vaxxed 2 will be starting their showings come January, a New Year release. We look forward to seeing as many people as possible out. And like I said, everything that is made through this film is going to be going towards Vaccine Choice Canada. So come on out, support your medical freedom rights. We're really excited about this, you guys. So like I said, thank you so much, Ted. And
Amanda,
I hope
thank
we
you.
talk again soon. Yeah. Thanks so much.